Welcome to the LinkedIn Live broadcast on the release of the ISM report on business. Hi, everyone. My name is Dan Zeiger. I'm a senior writer and copy editor for Inside Supply Management, which is Institute for Supply Management's member publication. We're happy to have you with us as we discuss the manufacturing PMI data for April. The composite index reading was 48.7%, a second straight month of contraction. And the business survey panelists' comments can be summed up as noun, verb, tariffs. And on the heels of yesterday's announcement of a 0.3% decline in real U.S. GDP during the first quarter, as well as reports all over the place of a dramatic reduction in container ship traffic, you'd expect ISM's data to be even more closely watched in the coming months. And so that's why I'm really glad I can bring in the gentleman who always makes me better understand the manufacturing data. He's Timothy R. Fiore. He's the chair of the Manufacturing Business Survey Committee at ISM. And Tim, I usually ask you first just what stood out about the data of the previous month, but you were very clear in a conference call with media this morning that the production index was the story of this month. So, and it's got ramifications on revenue and employment and some other dynamics. So I guess that's a good place to start as any.
Yeah, good start, Dan. Hi, thanks. So, yeah, you look at it, 48.7 down from 49. Big deal. What's the big deal? It's pretty much soft landing reflective. When we had these numbers last year, it was soft landing reflective. Felt okay, no big deal. If you look over the last 4 months, we've only, the range of motion has only been 2 points. 50.9 back in January, 48.7. Okay, what's the big deal? Well, it's always in the detail. I take the 10 sub-indexes, break them down into the 3 elements of demand, outputs, and inputs. Let's talk about demand first. Demand was not as bad as I thought it probably would have been. But the point on the demand here is really our new export orders diminished almost to the 43 level. So it means our international partners are either not buying our product because of counter tariffs, or they're boycotting us, or some combination of both. So that's happening. 15-18% of U.S. GDP gets exported. So, okay, I believe, I don't know if that number had been 50 or 52, would we have broken the 50 number on new orders? I can't tell. But right now, our export, the companies that we ship product to around the world are starting to slow down their receipt of our stuff. They're not ordering as much. Okay, we can deal with that in the future. That, we can offer under lead time orders and things. Okay, fine. That's tomorrow's issue. Today's issue is the output side. The output is production, which is a surrogate for revenue, and it's employment. And the input side is supplier deliveries, inventory, prices, and imports. But let's talk about the output side. As Dan mentioned, a 44 on a production number is really alarming. A 45 is a yellow. A 43 is a red. Now, there are 4 big sub-indexes in these 10. First one's new orders, second one's production, third one's employment, fourth one is prices. When you have production, i.e. revenue, now down in a red-yellow range of 44, with no reason why it won't continue to head in that direction, that's really alarming. Coupled with that, you've got the employment number sagging yet again, not as bad as in March, but my guess is in May, you're going to see that number go down even further. So we're continuing to release people. In the month of March, we determined that although we were releasing more people according to the index than the month before, we were using freezing and attrition as a way of doing that. And that's an inexpensive, longer-term way to get your head count down. This month, in the month of April, we use layoffs more than the other 2. And that's a more drastic effort. It's more people disruptive, and it's more expensive, but it's also more immediate. So the urgency around getting the head count down, I think, is now picking up. And the production number, I don't see why that production number would ever go up in the near term. We've got depleted order books. We don't have a wealth of new orders coming in. How does this thing change? Business likes certainty. The current administration's strategic approach is to use uncertainty to somehow negotiate better deals with people. Like nobody will ever figure out what really happened. In the meantime, the U.S. business environment is frozen. We have no idea what to do. We don't know where to invest. We don't know how to invest. We've gone from a profit-focused year back in November, December. Clearly, we were profit-focused, optimism up, business-friendly administration, to we're now clearly in a liquidity-focused year because this thing probably is not going to resolve itself inside of Q3. And it may even be all the way through the end of the year. As I mentioned, I think last month on our call, this thing could go on through the end of the year. You guys do remember the John McCain famous thumbs up, thumbs down at midnight on, I think it was New Year's Eve of 2017. That's where we could be this time too. We'll see. But in the meantime, I don't see anything that's going to change our trajectory for one that continues to have a depleting order book and a depleting amount of goods to make and ship and deliver. And as a result of that, you're going to see layoffs continue. And in the meantime, you got prices going up because of additional tariffs being deployed. A lot to be said here. Let's continue on.
Yeah. Well, a couple other indexes that we paid attention to last month, and that dynamic continued this month. Supplier deliveries and inventories. A couple times we've mentioned in the past that increases in these indexes not necessarily related to positive developments, especially supplier deliveries, but inventory index reading in particular. We talked about that last month and continued this month. Likely a temporary boost, and as soon as any trade issues get resolved, you're going to see a change in direction in that. Just with another month of data to look at, what other dynamics can we add to that?
Okay, so we might have a timing issue here on the inventory. We always struggle with figuring out what that inventory is before the end of the month. But okay, you've got output dropping to a 44. Let's say that's a 5% reduction in output compared to March. You get inventories at the same level of March at a 51. Okay, so now your turn ratio is getting worse. Why is that? Well, it's because I pulled in all that I can. At 50.8, I don't think there's any more to advance in. When you're in a manufacturing environment, having 3 months of inventory is a big deal. And we've already called for a pull-in of inventory, especially on the imports, to try to avoid the tariffs. I think that's done. There's no more to be had. And remember, we're 30 some odd months of depleting inventory and depleting open orders. There's no more to be had. So there's no more tactic to avoid a possible tariff next month or the month ever. We got what we have, but we have more inventory than we really have an output demand for. So, okay, so we front load a little bit. Let's burn it off over the next couple of months, as long as demand doesn't collapse any further. And I think the supplier delivery number at 55.2, that has nothing really to do with suppliers struggling to keep up with increasing demand from all their customers. This is really a number that's related to disruptions at the ports driven by difficulty in clearing goods, primarily because now every container has a tariff on it. There's no longer no charge. It's either $100, $1,000, $10,000, whatever it is. So you're talking about maybe 30% of containers had tariffs on them before. Call it 50. Now you're talking 100%. I haven't seen the Customs Border Patrol organization expand their headcount. Although there is some automation here, on port entry, they fought automation forever, and this is part of the reason why. So there's a lot of manual effort that goes through clearing a receipt on a port when there's money involved. And that's what's driving our supplier delivery number up to 56. As Dan said, up is usually a good thing because it reflects stress on the supply base because of increasing demand. That's not what's happening here. But since we're on the port issue, you've all seen the communications, 35% fewer sailings out of Asia to U.S. ports. Okay, so what's next? Layoffs of longshoremen, layoffs of drivers, dormantizing transportation equipment, while this thing works itself out. Nobody's going to take in material from China that used to be cost competitive, and now they're paying 150% more for it. You've heard it from the Walmarts and Target, empty shelves. Well, we got that. It's coming. I mean, you're going to see it in the next month or two. But the other side of this is when all this stuff finally gets cleared up, we're going to have this huge rush of stuff coming into the ports again. You're going to have 50, 60 ships off the coast waiting to be unloaded, overtime for longshoremen, disruptions on the docks, trying to fast track containers to their ultimate location. So all of this for what is the real question here? For what are we trying to do? Because this is not about bringing manufacturing back to the U.S. Because if it is, we're looking at the U.S. being uncompetitive around the world. We are now a protectionist country where we're essentially subsidizing our industry against more competitive international players, which, when the day is done 5 years later, we won't be able to compete because we're a protected economy. So where is this really taking us? I don't know. The cynic in me is saying that this is all tied in to the whole Reconciliation Act, which continues to get stretched out. We're now talking, I think it's July 4th It started out to be Easter, then it went to Memorial Day, it's July 4th, then it's Labor Day, and before you know it, it'll be the end of the year. So we're living with this uncertainty through the end of the year, I believe, worst case. And what will that mean to us? I don't see the Fed cutting rates. How can they cut rates when you got pricing at 70 and more pricing headwinds coming? Now, that is not inflation, but that could lead to inflation. If people are paying more money for their goods, they're going to be demanding more pay in their paychecks. That will take a little while, but I don't see them cutting rates because of that. The only way they're going to cut rates is if employment really tanks. And we could be on the way for that. I think we're probably months away. But from a manufacturing standpoint, a 44 on a production number with employment continuing to sag, using layoffs more than attrition. Next month, that number could be 42, could be 44. Employment could be 41. It's going in the wrong direction. And I don't see how it's going to get resolved in the near term.
Yeah. Well, while we were talking about the ports, and you had mentioned something in the conference call with reporters earlier, wanted to make sure I understood and also give you a chance to elaborate on it because I thought it was really interesting. You said something to the effect that I heard that this tariffs environment is in many ways a lot more challenging than the pandemic was with the movement of containers because of all the administrative and the paperwork and the wrangling over who's going to pay the tariffs. Did I hear that right? And could you elaborate and just how do supply managers and vendors try to work through that?
Well, so think about it. When we had the port congestion, that's exactly what it was. It was port congestion. Which, okay, how do you decongest the port? Well, you process more containers every day. It's pretty simple. You need more trucks to get them off the site. You need 24/7. You need as much efficiency as possible. Get them moving. Not that complicated. This case, you got brokers involved. You got sellers involved. You get importers of record involved. You get ultimate user involved. You got money involved now. And we're talking significant amounts of money here, not insignificant. Medium and small businesses, they don't have the wherewithal to deal with this. Your larger businesses have brokers out there. They're going to pay the duty. They're going to bill you. You're going to pay the broker, They know how to do this. The other people who import, and you've seen some of the stories here, some of these small businesses waiting for their container to show up, and just the inefficiency of processing it. They got to talk to 4 or 5 people, and then they have to expedite it through the dock, and then they got to arrange for a driver. So this is a lot more complicated, and that's why you're seeing a supplier delivery number already at 52 with no increase in demand at all. It's all about port congestion and people not being able to get their material on time because of the administrative delays associated with paying tariffs on containers being received at ports.
Yeah. Just wanted to we'll continue to keep talking about it because it is the dominant. You mentioned, I think 82% of the headline comments were related to the tariffs. And here was one from a respondent in fabricated metal products that stood out to me. This person said, there's a lot of concern about the inflationary impacts from tariffs in our industry. Domestic producers are charging more for everything because they can. Those comments, I can, if you've seen the media reports so far this morning, those did not go unnoticed among the business media. Just kind of elaborate more on just, what this condition or these conditions are affecting the manufacturing community in ways that we haven't talked about yet to this point.
Yeah. We've talked about this on the call before. The best example here is steel and aluminum. So as soon as steel and aluminum tariffs were called for again, I think that was probably back in January, the spot price immediately went up to $900 and some odd a short ton from about $680. So if you want to buy imported product, you got to pay $900 a short ton. Well, within hours, the domestic price of steel in inventory rose to that spot price. Because why wouldn't you raise it to that price? All you have to do is sit on it for a month and you can raise it to that price. You're not going to give away $700 steel when 2 weeks from now you can charge $900. I mean, whoever said that domestic producers are going to give us a 25% discount to an international shipment of steel? It's not realistic. That's not how business works. What happens is the domestic producers raise their price to still have a gap against the international producer, but the gap is maybe 5%. So you're going to take 20% growth on domestic producers, 25 on import. I mean, this is no surprise. We saw this 7 years ago on the first tariffs. This is well known. Now, that same scenario on product that is made to order, made to special design, has a little bit of a different flavor to it. You get a lot more talk about buyers and sellers sharing some of this cost growth as they transition through. But ultimately, tariffs, like a tax, ends up on the consumer. And it'll eventually find its way. Just the more complicated the product is, the longer it will take to get to you. In the meantime, companies are chipping their margin a little bit to make it not so much of a shock for you. But like I said, this is no longer a margin year. This is a liquidity year because nobody knows where this is going. And when you're sitting here with a depleted order book and no new orders coming in, you're watching your cash. You're not so much worried about profitability, except how that contributes to your cash pile. You want to make sure that your cash is secure so you can pay payroll. You cut the payroll to minimize your cash drain. You stop deliveries from suppliers unless you really need it at that point to minimize your cash drain. That's where we're at. It's unfortunate. This is going to be the third year since the pandemic decline that we're working in a liquidity period. We did not have to be in this period. We felt really good in November, December, and even to some extent January that this was going to be a growth year, profit year, business friendly, regulations reduced. But the tariffs have confused all of that. And the way they've been deployed, the whole strategy of being secretive about what your ultimate goal is, saying one thing, doing another, and on, has led to the business community freezing. And we're going to stay frozen probably even longer than the first sense of certainty, because we're still not certain whether that certainty will be certain 2 weeks from now. This is all kind of tied together to like people fleeing the U.S. dollar. Yeah. Is it as secure as it used to be? Right now, I would say no, because we have a strategy that is led by uncertainty, and that is the enemy of business. And that's exactly where we're at. Now, the business guys may not be publicizing it this much because there's a price to pay for that, as you've seen. But we are a nonprofit. We're a bunch of volunteers. We take the data. We tell you what it says. And I'm telling you, with a production number of 44, revenue is declining. We're now using layoffs instead of attrition. We're continuing to cut headcount. Prices are high. We haven't seen the end of this. And, this is only going one way unless something very significant changes.
Yeah. Couple of indexes you alluded to, new export orders earlier. Wanted to give you a chance to elaborate on them because there are a couple indexes tucked here at the bottom of the report. Sometimes I wonder if I should ask you a little bit more about them from month to month. But yeah, this is certainly a good month to talk about them a little bit more. New export orders down 6.5 percentage points to 43.1%. And imports went into contraction, down 3 percentage points to 47.1. That imports number, you might kind of expect that with the bulk buying to get ahead of the tariffs, maybe waning down a little bit. But yeah, just talk about, those dynamics a little bit more.
Yeah. So the imports is really easy. Yeah. We peaked at 42.6 right around the Lunar New Year period. Not a huge amount. I mean, I think in the past I've seen 40, 54, 55 kind of ranges during, because we don't do a seasonal adjustment on this. So 47.1, I'm surprised. I mean, if we're really pulling forward, that number should be 50 or better. It's not. So what that's telling me is we're no longer pulling anything forward. We've pulled whatever forward we can. I think I mentioned earlier on, to have 3 months of manufactured good inventory sitting at a supplier plant is a very good thing. So if we started pulling stuff forward back in February, even March, you're pretty much washed out now. So the import number is not going to be strong. That's where it's at. But okay, fine. The new export order is much more alarming. Like I said, 15 to 18% of U.S. manufacturing output is shipped overseas. We're at 43. 43 is a bad number. It's a big warning sign. So why is that? Is it because global demand is down? Well, not any more than it was last month outside of maybe China. You got, Germany and China PMI about the same as they were last month. So not a huge change there in either economies. Neither one of them are doing well, but they haven't turned the page and collapsing. That's not the reason for our new export order decline. The reason is we got people boycotting us when they have choices. They're obviously making a choice to not buy U.S. goods. And we got counter tariffs that are affecting on this. And now financially, we may not be as competitive as we used to be. So, neither one of those are good. I don't see how that resolves itself outside of the tariff situation getting resolved, because it's more about who is the United States now and what are they trying to do internationally from a business standpoint. And the rest of the world isn't liking it. And you're seeing the results of that in the new export order number.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple other indexes here. I mean, that we haven't talked about. Certainly, prices has an impact on tariffs. The backlog, we talked about it a little bit, but I'll just preface it to this question. I kind of mentioned this in the introduction that we had last month, and it certainly continued this month. This dynamic. I mean, I've been a student of the report on business and its data since about 2018, since I started covering it for ISM, and I know you've been in it a lot longer than I have. I'm looking throughout this data for a positive trend, and I'm hard pressed to find one. You've spoken, we've talked about what could be coming regarding revenue, production, employment. None of it's good. Is there a ray of sunshine anywhere in this data?
You mean beyond a double negative? We were joking earlier on. I said the only positive here is really the fact that our manufacturing inventory number isn't 53. It's 50.8. That's a pretty weak positive. There's nothing positive about this report. But I'm gonna, for the people who've dialed in or will listen to this later, that's why understanding what makes up that top line number is really so important. There's no doubt this, as the morning went on, people saw this number 48.7. Oh, no big deal, 49. The 5 elements underneath that, and the other 5 that support the 5 are signaling negativity, bad. Production 40, that's bad. That's today. I mean, if the new order number was 44, I'd be worried about it too, but that's tomorrow. The production number of 44 is today. And we're listening to earnings calls. That's all a month ago. It doesn't even matter anymore, really, except how they really set themselves up for April, May, and June. We're off to a bad start here. No surprise. Too much confusion. People are frozen. Nobody's willing to speculate, not only in capital, but in their own inventory. We're kind of waiting. We're waiting. And because the implications are huge. It's like what happened here with China. We started out, I don't know, I forget the numbers. There's so many numbers. Let's say that the initial tariffs were 50% in addition to the 20% that China had. And then China went and did 60. Then we did 100. Then they did 125. Then we did what? Well, how are you supposed to plan around that? At 165 or whatever the number is right now, impossible. No business. At 65, it's still pretty much impossible. My experience in the China market is on manufactured goods, not consumer goods, and we were happy to be saving 20% landed. I mean, when the whole thing started, it was 30%. Right now it's probably, if you're saving 15% on landed goods out of China, you're doing pretty good. So, I mean, that's not a huge thing. So, how do you? There's no way you give that back with a 65% tariff. It just can't be done. So what are we going to do? Freeze everything, and have empty shelves? Because if a manufacturer can't afford to buy the Chinese product either, and they're now looking for others, and they're in a declining manufacturing environment anyway, they may just decide it's time to reassess ourselves, hunker down, destaff, restructure our supply chain, because China, even at 65%, is not something that's going to be sustainable. And that could be where we're sitting. We should be sitting here in a growth profile. We're sitting here in a declining profile because the administration is convinced that this is the right economic tool to restructure the world economy in the space of a couple of months. I think that's really unrealistic. Really. It took us 30 years to get here. It would take, even in an emergency, it would take us 5 years to clean it up, 3 months. I mean, this is huge disruption, and this is only the beginning. And we're the first number to show you what's actually happening in April from a revenue standpoint, output, and it's down. And we're continuing to destaff. And my guess is that employment number will be a lot worse in May.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely one of those months where I wish we had another half hour. We're coming close to the end of our time here, and we got a couple announcements we got to make before we close. But yeah, just wanted to give you an opportunity. I ask it all the time. Anything that we haven't talked about, or that you think would be important to include in the call before we wrap up?
Yeah, a couple things. So we saw a very similar thing in July of 24. And it was alarming. And unfortunately, the Fed was getting ready for their Jackson Hole event in August. And, by the time they actually were back looking at rates, to the extent, I don't know, back, they didn't not look at it. They cut rates in September. So this is a very similar report to what we saw in July. But the environment was a lot different. We didn't have a prices number at this level. So I don't know how they cut rates. I mean, the last time we saw production this low, everybody got nervous. We saw a rate cut. I don't think you're going to see that this time. The other thing here is that this number in new export orders is the lowest number outside the pandemic. And we know what drove those numbers, everybody going home and then struggling with getting people to come back. We haven't seen this kind of drop in new export orders since 2009, the Great Recession. The other one is if you look at the new order number, usually, we have 55%, 60% of respondents saying they're the same this month. This month in new orders, we had more people reporting up or down in new orders than we have reporting the same. We haven't seen that since 2009 either. So I think what that's saying is you get a ton of turmoil going on, a lot of turmoil. We haven't seen this kind of confusion in the new order level in 15 years. And, we'll see what May brings, but none of this is positive. It's not. And remember, we started this call with a 48.7 is only 0.3 down from last month.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, just continuing to be eventful. And, we've got a couple announcements to make. Before we wrap up, this is Tim's last go around as Manufacturing Business Survey Committee Chair. His successor is Sue Spence, and like Tim, she's a recipient of the J. Shipman Gold Medal Award, which is presented by ISM for career achievement. She's most recently known for her work at FedEx, but she has decades of experience in the aviation manufacturing industry. I've interviewed her many times, and I can assure you we'll have a lot of fun and insightful discussion on these broadcasts going forward. She takes over next month. And, Tim, this has been a lot of fun, and I know you won't be a stranger. Thanks for not only driving this train every month, but being a great friend of ISM and especially our magazine whenever I needed to reach out for a comment on a story or anything. There's that old joke about being retired. It takes up a lot of my time, and I'm happy for you that you finally get to see what that's like.
Yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate it. It's been a really good run. I mean, it's an interesting final report, and I'm actually glad I'm delivering it. I will say that Susan's a great replacement for me. Absolutely great. I've known her for many, many years. We came up through very similar businesses, very complicated, both technically and operationally, with a huge amount of dependent demand and a huge amount of spare parts business too. So she's well qualified for this. She's going to do a great job. It's been a huge amount of fun for me for 8 years to have a bird's eye view and what's actually happening before other people can see it. And I think this is an excellent month to show that, and that, hey, we're seeing a real downturn here. Everybody's kind of waiting for a sign. We got a sign here. We're the first one to give you an indication of what's going on in the general economy. We generally are 6 to 9 months ahead of the general economy. If nothing changes, this is where we're headed by the end of the year. And could very well be nothing will change until the end of the year. But it's been a real pleasure working with you guys at ISM and the whole team, Christina, Paul, Rosemarie, Jennifer. It's been a big pleasure. Sue will do a great job. She'll continue this thing. People will value the analysis. And because like we just showed today, that headline number looked okay, but the stuff underneath it does not look okay. And that's really the role of ISM, to not only collect that information, but figure out what it all means. And right now it means we're in for, not a very rough ride for the next 3 or 4 months. Yeah. And I can attest from personal experience. I mean, if you care about the manufacturing sector and, and a segment of the economy, become a student of the ISM report on business and the data and how it works. It's definitely worth your time. Thanks for joining us today. For more information, feel free to go to ismworld.org, where you can read our roundup article that details a lot of what Tim and I have discussed here. And if you want to be a part of the ISM Manufacturing Services or Hospital Business Survey panels that compile data for the report on business, you can visit ismworld.org/join the panel for more information. So join us on Monday when we break down the services PMI with Steve Miller. He's the chair of ISM Services Business Survey Committee. And this is where I usually say we'll see you back here in a month's time, but June 1st through the 3rd is ISM's annual conference in Orlando, Florida, which impacts the schedules and availability of our personnel here. So keep watch on ISM's LinkedIn page for an announcement on when we'll break down the May ISM report on business with our new chair, Sue Spence. So for Tim Fiore and the people who helped us behind the scenes, their names are Christina Cahill and Jennifer Stevens. I'm Dan Zeiger. We'll see you next time.